again. Welcome back to Sustainability Live Singapore 2025. Time for our next interactive panel now on AI in sustainability. Now let's meet our guests. First of all, we're joined by Terence L. Jayratnam, Associate Professor at Monash Business School. Also with us, Jackson Burney, Regional Sustainability Lead APAC at Workiva. And also joining us is Stuart Scott, Sustainability Practice Lead at Asia Pacific at DSS Plus. Hello to all of you, how are you?
Well,
hello.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very well.
Good to see you all. Thank you very much indeed. Now, AI is a subject which has been coming up time and time again through our discussions through the show today. So, you know what? Let's do a whole panel on it as well. It seems appropriate because it seems to be involved in every single conversation. Terence, I'll kick things off with you if I can. When we come to the impact AI is having on sustainability progress across different industries. From your experience, what kind of impact do you feel it's having?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Neil. So interestingly, if you look at the word sustainability, AI is in there. So you could almost say AI is in sustainability. So the sorts of things, I guess AI is fairly new in terms of, I guess, being called AI and that regenerative power of AI. But where we're seeing it is in preparedness for natural disasters, particularly floods and fires. Fighting air pollution, so very good at monitoring, the particle levels and warning systems around air pollution and what to prepare for, particularly in cities where air pollution is an issue like Delhi and so on. Biodiversity monitoring, very good at large volumes of data and monitoring. Data analysis, which we'll go further into no doubt, given the panelists. Sustainable agriculture, we're seeing more and more, again, data-based solutions in sustainable agriculture. Defective production. So, I mean, if you look at the production chain, if you can reduce defects and improve quality, you have a lower footprint. Then you've got workplaces where you've got safer workplaces, reduced energy consumption, optimizing renewable energy, and optimizing logistics. So there's a range of industries where we're starting to see AI contributing to improving sustainability performance. But coming from, I guess, a Monash perspective, the academic sort of perspective around this in academic theory is an equation called impact equals population times affluence times technology. So the impact, i.e. the footprint that you have from an environmental or climate point of view, is the size of the population, and that's only going north. The affluence, so the middle class rising, particularly in India and China, and technology. And technology is where AI sits. And technology is the only lever we currently have to reduce impact, i.e. bring down the impact if you look at P times A times T. So hopefully, we're starting to see more and more impact reduction from AI. Obviously, we'll talk about the negative impact of AI as well.
Thank you, Terence. It's amazing how often things can be turned into an equation. I can almost hear people trying to write that down as you said that. Could you just repeat that equation again? Because I'm sure some people were trying to get their heads around it for a second.
Yeah, it's called IPAT. And that's the easiest way to remember that. I equals P times A times T, population times affluence times technology.
Thank you, Terence. I hope you all got that. Jackson Burney, will come to you next. If you can fit this into an equation, I'll be very impressed. Your thoughts on impact?
Yeah, that's a good one. Although I actually preferred Terence's first statement. You can't spell sustainability without AI. But look, I would say that sustainability, AI and sustainability is impacting every industry. If we look at the regulatory impact coming through Asia, driven mostly by the IFRS standards or the ISSB IFRS standards, we're seeing a very large impost on business as they try to grapple the new mandatory disclosures. And artificial intelligence is really helping organizations who have never done this before understand it from all types of topics like how to compile their data, how to improve their data collection methods, but also how to actually extend sustainability principles throughout the organization. If we all have a agreed upon baseline that sustainability is everybody's business, well, AI tools make new topics accessible to everyone. And so we see that impact across every industry.
Thank you, Jackson. Stuart Scott, I'll come to you last on this one, on impact.
Yeah, I think AI is having a huge impact, particularly when we're talking about the aggregation of data relating to sustainability. And I think that's where there's real opportunity for AI to accelerate the application of sustainability initiatives in organizations. And I can think of, areas like smart grids, renewable energy forecasting, and energy consumption, particularly when it comes to electrification of industries. I think AI has a huge part to play in terms of optimization of supply and demand when it comes to electrification. I think also, some of the other speakers touched on climate change and environmental protection. I think there's a really good opportunity to impact through AI application in things like tracking of emissions, methane emissions through satellite data, carbon footprint reduction. Climate modelling is a huge topic, and we just heard about the IFRS, ISSB standards. But, in particular in Singapore and Southeast Asia and places like Australia, those kind of standards are really going to rely on data in order to be applied in an effective way. And, standards like the ASRS, the Australian Sustainability Reporting Standard, S2 standard, are going to really rely on climate scenarios, which again are dependent upon data in order to assess the impact of those scenarios on not only your own business, but also on the environment, the other way around.
Thank you, Stuart. What I'd like to go next is, I'm going to put you all on the spot for a moment if I can. It'd be remiss of me to have three speakers of your experience and not do that at some point. And what I'd love to do is get some examples from you, whether this is big or small, I don't mind, of great examples that how you've seen AI used to help with sustainability. What have been the most exciting? Jackson, I'll start with you. Which ideas have really excited you?
Well, I really love how AI can help with that data problem. And it's not just a matter of helping people collect their carbon footprint, but as organizations are mandated to disclose their scope 3, how they can use tools to actually understand their emissions from their supply chain. And we see some really powerful tooling help organizations actually grapple that scope 3 challenge. A specific example is that supply chain emissions are usually comprised of big suppliers and little suppliers, and big suppliers are already disclosing their emissions. So AI is a perfect example of sort of bringing those pre-disclosures and mapping them to your organizational footprint. And so, okay, rather than sending them an email and saying, do you know your emissions? Can you tell me what those emissions are? Let's use some really great tooling to actually scrape the net for information that your suppliers have already disclosed. And we see that, to me, that is a huge benefit to organizations as they grapple with their scope 3 requirements.
Stuart.
Yeah, I think some of the really passion topics for me at the moment are, in particular, methane. I think, methane is one of the most potent greenhouse gases that we're grappling with from climate change perspective. And, some really exciting applications of AI are happening in that application of satellite technology to not only unlock make more transparent the methane emissions, but also to unlock the actual quantification of methane emissions. And just small changes in the amount of leaks that we're seeing in the oil and gas industry, landfill operators, coal mining, through application of AI to the data sets that we're gathering through various satellite media and also on the ground and aircraft monitoring really enables us to do some cool stuff and really quantify in a much more accurate way the methane emissions that are leaking from oil and gas and other facilities. And that enables organisations to not only detect those emissions, but also to do something about it and make money from them, which is, in my view, one of the best ways to really create an impact through sustainability.
A real win-win there. Terence, your thoughts?
There are lots of really interesting examples. So one globally is Google's DeepMind, which is an AI-based weather program. It's demonstrated that up to 20% better accuracy can be done on weather forecasting using AI, and events can be predicted up to 15 days in advance. So again, this sort of goes to mitigating climate impacts and mitigating sort of large-scale natural disasters and the impacts that follow from that. But just to, I guess, go through some of the examples that we just heard about, I've seen another sort of supplier, they're called Purpose Bureau, who use AI to scrape data. And we talked about Scope 3 data, but these guys do all ESG data on all businesses. So they started with Australia, but they're going globally. On 2.2 million ABNs in Australia, which is a business registration number for Australian businesses, they've got any ESG data that they can find, and then map it with, other sort of data that they could relate it back to, like credit bureau data. So logging it back into number of directors, number of female directors, all that sort of stuff. So that's really interesting. And then we talked about satellite technology for methane, but similarly, I sit on a board on a not-for-profit called Australian Conservation Foundation, and they use a network of gamers who use satellite technology to look into logging in Australia. And wherever logging's starting to happen, satellite technology picks it up, and then gamers using AI notify ACF, and ACF investigators can go in and have a look to see whether that's happening. And we had a large-scale illegal logging incident stopped as a result of that in Queensland last year.
It's examples like that that show just how big or small the progress can be, because in isolation that might not seem like a huge thing, but it means so much in that particular environment. So thank you for that example, Terence. Where I'd like to go next, though, is the key challenges in using AI when it comes to sustainability. We all know it can facilitate progress, but it's not always that easy always to implement. Stuart, I'll start with you. What are the key challenges, though, when it comes to implementation?
Well, I mean, AI itself requires data. And one of the challenges that I face, or my clients face, is being able to get consistent data from, things like sensors, monitors, but also from, people's keystrokes on computers as well. Aggregating that into a consistent data set is always a challenge. And then obviously there's a sequence of processes that data needs to be take throughout an organisation, which needs to be managed and designed in order for the data to reach its final resting point or reporting point in a lot of cases with environmental data. So in terms of challenges in application of AI, if you don't have a consistent data set, or you have gaps in your data set, AI can only do as much as it can with the data that it's getting. I think there's also other challenges with regard to the application of AI on the demand end. You as a sustainability manager, what you're concerned about is being able to aggregate up all the data and to report or to utilize it in a consistent way. but that's not going to necessarily stop the demand for things like clothing and other waste products being created. So there's a need to not only manage the data itself, but there's also a need to think about the application of AI in consumer goods, and then ultimately how that flows through into the waste products that are being discarded at the end of the value chain.
Thank you, Stuart. I'll come to you next on that, Terence. But just before I do, Stuart, you're talking about the importance of data. Let's progress that whilst you're on that subject. How do you advise people when they're asking this? How do you go about getting that good, clean, useful data from whether it's monitoring, whether it's suppliers, whoever? What's your guidance on that?
Well, I think it starts with really thinking at the end of the chain. If you're looking for clean data to be reporting to authorities as an environmental manager, or if you're looking for sustainability information that you want to use, you need to think about what are the outputs, what are the ultimate reports that you need to produce, or what are the end outputs for the data that the AI tool is going to produce. So, some tips in terms of where to start. The first place to start is the ultimate output, and then working your way back up the chain to identify those pain points or those areas or gaps within that data flow, the data structure, will help to identify the focus areas to start with in terms of putting your resources and effort around, or the investment that you need to make in sensors or other automated tools to enable that data to be flowing into the right spot.
Thank you, Stuart. Apologies, Terence, I went off on a slight tangent there, but I thought it was an important question to follow up with Stuart. Your thoughts, Terence, on the key challenges of using AI for sustainability?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. We talked about computer energy there with Stuart. I think the other challenges are, with computer energy, though, I think we've got to remember that we're on the first sort of version of AI. So DeepSeek has reduced the computing energy needed by significantly. So hopefully the AI backend continues to improve and refine. But water use is the other one. Because you're using energy, you need water to cool. Some estimates suggest that by 2027, the amount of water use just for AI is going to be the size of the amount of water used by Denmark as a country, or half the water that UK uses. You've got labor and human rights issues. So there's a case study in terms of ChatGPT using a firm in Kenya that was paying $1.32 to $2 per hour to work on ChatGPT. So you've got the human rights and worker rights issues. And then, of course, you've got the issue that William McCaskill calls essentially, why AI might limit progressive thinking in society, which, if you can imagine a scenario where if AI as a technology was developed during the time when slave trade was okay, well, AI will assume that slave trade was okay. So we're coming up with a significant uplift in AI at a particular time. And this particular time was looking okay. It was progressing well for women and developing countries and, former sort of slave trading issues and people of color. But we've still got a range of human rights issues that we're dealing with at this particular time when we're seeing the AI explosion. So the question then is AI going to sort of really be a point in time machine? How is it going to evolve, and how is it going to cope with the voluminous data that it looks back at and refine and work through what is progressive and what's not? And we've had case studies of people not being recognized because there's not enough people of color in AI models and so on and so forth. So that's a really interesting proposition in terms of, what is the impact of AI exploding at this particular time? And I think we were going along well until we're now seeing quite a shift to in politics, extreme right. There's a range of anti-climate sentiments. What's happening in the US. What is the impact of all of that when it comes to AI and the modeling that it takes forward?
That is a fascinating perspective, the thought that it'll view the status quo as the constant. That is a fascinating way to look at it, and actually slightly scary at the same time. So I'll leave everyone to dwell on that for a second. Jackson, if I can come to you last on that, on the key challenges.
Yeah, I'd probably talk about two things, I'd say. The first is accuracy, validation, and security of data. I think we've all been in the situation where you put something into the chat bot and it'll sort of make up a fact, right? And organizations can't rely on sort of unvalidated, non-assured data when they're getting to their disclosure. And similarly with security, organizations are relying on purchasing accounting data to get a first pass at their scope 3, footprint. And so being wary, or at least conscious of the security you have in place to protect your organization's, purchasing accounting data, should that get in the wrong hands, that could be disastrous for some organizations, right? So really having that security in mind as you implement an AI data strategy, that you go, okay, well, we are going to be relying on other parts of our business to actually inform our plan here, and just having good protocols around that. And then the second thing I'd have here is that, for every AI model that's been built, and we see this a lot in universities where students are submitting AI, projects, that there's tools to determine if things have been generated by AI. And so what we don't want to do is get to a position where organizations are using AI or leaning too heavily on AI for their sustainability disclosure, and effectively giving the impression that they're taking action, but not actually doing it. This form of AI greenwashing. And I think this is a major challenge that organizations, as well as consumers of that information from those organizations, need to be conscious of. I'm reminded of this this marketing company in Australia who were claiming to be AI powered, but really they just had if-then logic. If people were typing in something, then it would spit out predetermined facts and or images, and that company went bankrupt, and rightly so. But as consumers of this, we need to be aware that the overproliferation of AI may lead to negative consequences.
AI greenwashing, that's also a concerning thought. And you're absolutely right, Jackson. It can make things up. One of my first experiments with AI was I asked, in a moment of pure vanity, a question about myself. And apparently I died in a car crash in 2018, which, as far as I know, isn't true. Last time I checked anyway, God willing. Anyway, let's move on from that rather unusual note. True story, slightly scary. Terence, if I can go to you next on the question about making sure AI solutions ethical and don't harm the environment in other ways. It's an area you've touched on in a couple of other questions so far. Your thoughts on that? How do you make sure that they are ethical and aren't having unintended consequences?
Yeah, I think it's I sort of answered that in my previous comments, but I think if we can see more and more AI data being fed from different countries, not just, I guess, Western countries. I think we're getting a lot of data from the US, UK, Europe, and so on. I think if we can expand that would help. I think if we can, in some way also weight modern day present issues more than historical issues, that might also help. I don't know how much of that's going on. But, one example that I often think about is, I think animal cruelty is decreasing, and the prediction is that it will continue to further decrease over the next 50 years because, younger people don't want to see animal cruelty. But how is that getting modeled into AI? Is that just progressive thinking in humans, and how does that reflect in AI and the way AI thinks about innovation to reduce animal cruelty and move to alternative proteins, for example? The other way you must do it, and we're not seeing enough work here. We are seeing some action in Australia, but the legislative control around AI. So the EU AI Act is I guess one of the first Europe's landmark AI regulation, which touches on sustainability considerations associated with design, training, and the use of AI. And I think that's a regulated approach that you can bring to reduce harm from AI.
Thank you. Jackson Birney at Workiva, come to you next.
I think there's sort of a self-defeating prophecy around AI in the sense that the more powerful it becomes, the more useful it becomes for organizations, but also the more energy it uses. And so, my view here is that, AI should be used to augment and enhance, not replace or supplant, sustainability disclosures, decarbonization efforts. And so, as it becomes more useful, hopefully organizations are treating the use of AI as part of their decarbonization plan, right? So any reductions that they're actually achieving are, kept in mind with the amount of energy use that they're using through, their AI deployment.
Yeah, when the word augmentation was used when it came to AI, that's when things started to genuinely make sense to me about it. That's the difference there from my perspective. Stuart Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think in terms of AI, it's a tool and it can be very powerful, but it can be misused. And I think it's important to bear in mind people's privacy and also, the potential harm that could be done through AI. And in particular, I'm thinking of, applications of AI in, for example, precision farming or agriculture, where organizations now are using data that are, common data sets, but not necessarily private, it's publicly available information, but some of the data that could be used potentially crosses over into sensitive or confidential areas. And I think that's where limitations on AI could need to be monitored or at least regulated to ensure that it's not misused. I think there's definitely some potential for misuse if not controlled.
Thank you, Stuart. Let's go on to some questions from the audience now, as they've been coming in thick and fast over the last 25 minutes or so. So you are being put on the spot slightly with some of these. I will start with this one here, and if I can start with you, Jackson, on this. From your point of view, your advice, what's the best way to utilise AI on a route to becoming a sustainable company? What are your thoughts on that? The best ways to use it?
Well, I think going back to first principles around sustainability disclosure is that what can be measured can be managed. And so implementing good AI tooling to help with data collection, to help organizations sort of reduce the burden, I think that can sort of be a first good step there, right? There is, and I'll come at this from a Workiva perspective. So, our AI tooling helps organizations sort of streamline where they can. I made mention before around trying to understand the emissions from your supply chain. But then as you get to the reporting piece, how can you craft good narrative relative to the data that you've collected and tell the story around what your organization is doing? So I think, finding good solutions that implement AI tooling with your data is probably the best start.
Thank you. Stuart, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I would echo Jackson's comments there. I think that definitely it is the shiny new tool, and applying the shiny new tool to a process that's broken or already in your organization, or a really not well thought through process for sustainability reporting, or in terms of application of more efficient practices in your organization. Now, if you haven't thought through the fundamentals before applying AI, really all you're going to be doing is creating more of workflow or a more workload for your own people to manage a tool that's not really effective. So thinking through the fundamentals, we talked about data and data structuring, prior to applying an automation or an AI type tool, I think is a fundamental tenet for you to apply AI in your sustainability organization or your sustainable organization.
Okay, well, I'll just extend on that slightly for a second, Stuart. If the critical thing is to think through your fundamentals, if I was coming to you from my business saying, how do I go about that? What advice would you give?
Yeah, well, think about why you want to be sustainable in the first place, and how are you achieving that sustainability? So, for example, if you're an organisation that is an oil and gas organisation, if you're trying to optimise the sustainability of your the energy efficiency of your organisation, for example, is that ultimately going to have an impact on your overall materiality of the sustainability initiatives that you're undertaking? If the focus is around Scope 3 emissions for your organisation, maybe you need to think about just getting your supplier management processes and your supplier contractor management processes under control first before you apply AI or other fancy technologies to reducing your Scope 3 emissions. So just thinking about those material topics that you're trying to address to improve your sustainability helps you to focus the effort and put the automation tools or other more efficiency tools in place in the right spot, and therefore you're spending your money wisely.
Thank you, Stuart. Yeah, that does give a bit of background in getting your own house in order before you start playing with the lovely new toys or tools as you describe it. Terence, I'll just go back to the original question, if I can, about the best ways to utilise AI on a journey to being a sustainable company. Your thoughts?
So I might take a slightly different angle in looking at, how do you reduce waste and how do you improve organizational efficiency using AI. So as an example, in a professional services firm or in a university, you'd spend hours and hours trying to organize meetings. You might have executive assistants. And, what's the power of AI to look across all of the calendars and look across other schedules that people have and work through a meeting cadence instead of going to the doodle poll. So that could be a solution. I think these solutions will emerge, but we spend a lot of time, being inefficient, trying to coordinate meetings and meetings sometimes. We're now taking meeting notes, which is great because someone had to type those up. So things that hopefully efficiency improves within organizations. And I think the other potential that you have is sort of resourcing, finding the right people for the right jobs. And that is often a challenge. So how do you do that? And particularly in a gig economy where, you can find resources all around the world. How do you use AI to do that? So I think there's lots of opportunities for organizational efficiency and effectiveness, which then reduces the footprint that you have in creating whatever you create.
Yeah, there are so many opportunities there. Before I get on to a bit of a future outlook, one area I would like to explore, which I don't feel we've done so yet, is the question of people. Because it's amazing how often, how does the adage go about how often tech problems are actually people problems? Stuart, I'll start with you if I can, as I can see you nodding away there. Your advice on making sure your organisation, your people, are ready to use AI to help push your sustainability progress. Your thoughts there? How do you go about it?
Yeah, well, obviously, we've already talked about the security sort of issues and making sure that AI itself is not going to compromise, the confidentiality or the sensitivity or your business operations. So that's assumed that is under control. I think from a people perspective, you're going to get broad spectrum of different appetite for the use of AI in your organization. I think, in my organization, we're a professional services firm, and that's effectively people using their brains. And so our clients don't necessarily want our organization to be using AI for the basic, product that we're producing, which is what we sell. We sell ourselves. Where we can apply AI in a professional services environment is to really infuse the existing brain power that we have with additional data or additional insights, and then curate that. And I see a great opportunity for us to utilize AI as an efficiency tool to speed up the process that we undertake anyway for our clients. I think in a more broad professional environment where AI has the potential to replace workers, then I think that needs to be really taken into account as to what's in it for the workers themselves. In a sort of blue collar environment, it needs to be thought about just what kind of AI tools are the most applicable ones to be utilized by workforces at different levels. I can think of some examples of tools that effectively are almost like digital assistants, almost like a shadow worker that assists people to do their jobs, basic jobs or more complex jobs. But those types of digital worker AI tools are very helpful in speeding up workflows, making more efficient workflows in an organization that can be already quite complex or bureaucratic in its work processes. AI can help to cut across a lot of those silos within an organization.
Thank you, Stuart. Terence, I'll come to you next on the people question.
Thanks, Neil. You might remember I talked about inequality at Sustainability Live 2024, and one of the content pieces was AI and inequality. And so my concern around people would be, how does AI increase inequality? So we just heard about bias in data and algorithms and job displacement, and people are concerned about losing jobs. Access to AI technology, access has always been an issue. Access to internet is a form of inequality. Surveillance and privacy concerns have been mentioned. I think a concentration of power. So how does AI further concentrate wealth and power to those that already have the capital, who can invest in AI? So that tends to again sort of increase the disparity. And finally, sort of disinformation and manipulation. So we're starting to see social media platforms using AI more and more to drive algorithms at a much greater level than we've ever seen, with disinformation and manipulation. And if you look at the World Resources Institute's top 10 global risks, disinformation is a top 10 global risk. So what is AI's contribution to that?
Thank you, Terence. And we are right up on time. So Jackson, I'll give you the final word on this, on the people question.
So I'd probably go back to 2 points I'd said already, and that's around accessibility and augmentation. I think as organizations are embarking on this journey, know that there's no easy button. There's no one button that's going to make it all go away, and that actually sustainability principles remain intact, and that AI tools should be here to actually assist organizations in the journey. I think from an accessibility perspective, AI has the power to make previously sort of inaccessible concepts or I wouldn't say inaccessible, but perhaps like if I think about the greenhouse gas protocol, not everyone knows what is scope 1, scope 2, or scope 3, or why something may be scope 3 versus scope 1. it is a complex thing, but AI has the tools here to break down those barriers and make it more accessible for both consumers and inputters of sustainability data to actually get a handle on this. And then the augmentation here is around once you have that data, use AI tools to identify hotspots in your emissions and identify gaps in your data to actually assist in the journey of decarbonisation and help organisations move from this sort of obligation, we've got to get this done, to now opportunity. Now that we've taken care of this, how can we use our sustainability program powered by AI to actually attract more business investment, more capital, attract more customers, and actually achieve those efficiencies that good sustainable organizations are benefits of.
Jackson, thank you very much indeed. And I'm afraid we are right up on time. There were so many more things I wanted to get into. There were more audience questions I didn't get round to, so apologies if I didn't fit yours in. But Terence, Jackson, Stuart, thank you so much for joining us here at Sustainability Live Singapore.
Thank you.
Neil.
Thank you. Pleasure.